that you were a virgin proved to his family that he fathered your 16-month-old daughter, Joya. Heard about your son's relationship. Plaintiff is motivated by money, refused to accept her child. Is your child's biological father?
1,000% certain.
1,000,000%, Your Honor, because he would have told me something of her, that he was in a relationship with her if he was.
I disagree, Your Honor. In his company while he's been on the phone talking to his mother.
So, Ms. Delaney, you were dating a man who was older than your mother, trying to cover that up, which is why he never talked about it to his mother. Wouldn't you think that he would talk about that? Ms. Delaney, tell me, how did you meet?
And he stopped me and approached me. And we went to a mutual friend's house.
And did he know you were a virgin?
He did. We went to a hotel. I didn't want to pay for it. He didn't want to pay for it.
So you got to the hotel, he thought you was going to pay. So you say, no, I'm not paying for this hotel.
Correct.
And he says, I'm not paying either.
And went to the mutual friend's house. And
She walked into the courtroom holding her mother's hand, her shoulders tense, her face calm but tired in a way that only comes from carrying a truth no one wants to believe. She wasn't there for drama. She wasn't there for money. She was there because she had a child, a living reminder of a relationship that now existed only in memories and unanswered questions. Across from her sat the family of the man she said was her daughter's father, a man who was no longer alive to speak for himself. She said she had been a virgin when she met him. She said she had never been with anyone else. And she said without hesitation that he was the father of her baby girl, Jaya. Her voice didn't shake when she said it. It didn't rise in anger. It stayed steady, almost protective, like a mother standing between doubt and her child. The man she described was older than her own mother. That fact alone made the courtroom shift. It explained the secrecy. It explained why the relationship had stayed hidden, why he never introduced her to his family, why he avoided conversations that would expose their age gap. She believed he kept quiet not because he didn't care, but because he was afraid of how it would look. She explained how they met, a chance encounter on the street. A conversation that felt harmless at first, a walk to a friend's house, time passing too quickly, trust forming too easily. She told him she was inexperienced. She told him the truth. And when the moment came, she believed it meant something. Candles, quiet promises, the illusion of care. To her, it wasn't casual. It was her first time, and she treated it that way. Their relationship continued for months. Not loudly, not openly, always in pieces. He came and went, changed cars, met her away from home, never stepped fully into her life. But she believed he was hers. And when she became pregnant, she believed there was no question who the father was. Her mother remembered the moment something felt wrong. A meal that suddenly made her sick, a feeling she couldn't explain, a mother's instinct telling her that one of her daughters was pregnant. Tests were taken, truth was revealed. And instead of anger, her mother stepped in to help. Doctors' visits, support, preparation for a baby that would arrive with or without a father fully present. The man didn't deny the child. He said she looked like him. He gave her a nickname. He acknowledged her quietly, inconsistently, but enough to give hope. Still, he didn't attend appointments. He wasn't there when the baby was born. He didn't sign the birth certificate. Half present, half gone, always just enough to confuse, never enough to commit. Eventually, pressure came. Responsibility had to be claimed, assistance was needed, and that meant naming a father. The court date was set. A DNA test was scheduled, and then, suddenly, the man died. The news didn't bring closure. It brought suspicion, silence that felt too convenient. She wondered if he was avoiding responsibility, if disappearing was easier than facing the truth. When she reached out to his family, she was met with disbelief, grief mixed with doubt, pain layered over pain. They didn't know her. They had never heard of her. They believed if their son had a child, he would have told them. They believed she was chasing something that didn't belong to her. And so the courtroom became the only place where answers could exist. She spoke for her child. She corrected them when they called her the baby. She said her name over and over again, Giaya. A name that deserved respect, a name that deserved truth. She didn't deny their loss. She acknowledged it, but she refused to let her daughter be erased by doubt. The DNA test was read. Not from the father, but from his mother. A scientific attempt to find connection where memory could not. The results came back cold, final, unfeeling. 0% related. No biological link. No shared blood. The room reacted instantly. Relief on one side, shock on the other, tears fell, denial surfaced. The young mother couldn't accept it. She stood by her truth. She stood by her daughter. Even when science said otherwise, her heart refused to let go. The judge spoke gently but firmly, about worth, about self-respect, about the importance of knowing the truth, even when it hurts. And still, the mother stood behind her child, choosing belief over biology, loyalty over logic. And just as the room settled into the weight of that loss, another story walked in. Another mother, another child, another man standing in denial. This time, the relationship had never been love. It was brief, physical, undefined. A connection built on moments, not promises. The man said he didn't know about the child for a year. He said he would have stepped up if he had known. He said the mother disappeared, played games, blocked him, made it impossible to find her. The mother said the opposite. She said she told him the day she found out. She said he vanished, ghosted her, changed his number, walked away. She said she searched for him while carrying the weight alone. She said when she finally reached him, he met the child once, then disappeared again. She spoke about the pain of being asked where her daughter's father was, about not having an answer, about holding her child while crying, wondering how to explain abandonment to someone too young to understand it. The man argued back. Accusations flew. Stories overlapped and contradicted each other. Other men were mentioned. Hallways, porches, cars. Confusion replaced clarity, and beneath it all was a child who had no say in any of it. The judge listened, not just to words but to patterns, to emotion, to responsibility avoided and pain carried. She reminded them that creating life is not a game, that children are not consequences to be debated, but people who deserve presence, not excuses. The DNA test was read. This time the truth landed differently. He was the father. The room shifted again. Laughter broke through tears, relief mixed with regret. A child finally had an answer. But the answer came with responsibility, with years already lost, with moments that could never be returned. The judge didn't celebrate. She didn't scold. She reminded them both that truth is only the beginning. That being a parent is not proven by DNA alone, but by showing up again and again, even when it's hard. And somewhere between denial and proof, between anger and relief, two children sat at the center of stories they never chose, waiting for adults to finally choose them. The courtroom didn't quiet down immediately after the results were read. Truth has a way of echoing, especially when it lands differently than expected. In the first case, disbelief lingered in the air, heavy and unresolved. In the second, confirmation brought relief, but also exposed years of avoidance that could no longer be hidden behind confusion or excuses. The young mother from the second case held her breath when the words were spoken. She didn't scream. She didn't jump. She simply closed her eyes for a moment, like someone who had been holding a weight for too long and finally felt it loosen. For her, the result wasn't about winning. It was about finally being believed, about finally being able to answer her daughter's question without hesitation. The man stood still. His face changed slowly, like reality taking its time to settle in. This wasn't a rumor anymore. It wasn't something he could argue away or doubt into silence. This was his child, flesh of his flesh. A little girl who had already learned how to walk, talk, and ask for him without knowing why he wasn't there. The judge looked at him carefully. Not with anger, not with judgment, but with expectation. She reminded him that DNA doesn't just confirm biology, it calls for action. That fatherhood isn't proven in courtrooms, but in living rooms, school hallways, late-night phone calls, and early morning responsibilities. She told him that being present mattered more than being perfect. The mother spoke again, her voice softer now. She said she didn't want revenge. She didn't want to punish him. She didn't want money or apologies that sounded rehearsed. All she wanted was for her daughter to know her father, to feel chosen, to feel claimed, to feel like she wasn't an afterthought in someone else's life. The judge nodded, acknowledging the honesty in her words. Then she turned to the man and made it clear, this moment was not an ending. It was a beginning, a chance to do what hadn't been done before, a chance to stop running. As the second case came to a close, the contrast between the two stories became impossible to ignore. One child left without a biological link to the man her mother believed was her father. Another child finally connected to the man who had doubted her existence. Two different outcomes, but the same emotional cost: confusion, loss, and the long road toward acceptance. In the first case, the young mother sat quietly after the ruling. The words 0% still echoed in her mind. Science had spoken, but her heart hadn't caught up yet. She felt exposed, questioned, and misunderstood. Not just as a woman, but as a mother who had built her child's identity around a belief that was now being challenged. Her own mother held her hand tightly. To her, loyalty mattered more than test results. She believed her daughter. She believed in standing beside her, even when the world leaned the other way. She wasn't ready to accept that her granddaughter's story had just been rewritten in a single sentence read aloud by a stranger. The judge addressed them with concern, not condemnation. She spoke about self-worth, about understanding the difference between belief and proof, about the importance of knowing the truth, even when it breaks something you thought was solid. She urged the young woman to reflect, not to shame herself, but to protect her future and her child's. But truth doesn't always bring instant clarity. Sometimes it brings grief. Sometimes it brings denial. And sometimes it brings a silence so loud it's hard to breathe through. The family of the deceased man reacted with relief. Their grief had already taken enough from them. The idea of another responsibility, another unanswered question, had felt overwhelming. The DNA result gave them certainty. It allowed them to close a door that had reopened wounds they weren't ready to face. Still, even in relief, there was discomfort. Because while the child wasn't biologically related, she was still a child whose life had been shaped by the man they loved. A child whose existence had intersected with theirs in a way that could not simply be erased. The judge reminded everyone that paternity cases are never just about adults. They are about children who carry the weight of choices they didn't make. Children who absorb the consequences quietly, often without explanation. As the courtroom prepared to move on, the emotional residue of both cases lingered. Two mothers had come seeking answers. Two men had been questioned. Two children had waited silently while adults argued over their origins. One child left with clarity but uncertainty about what her father would do next. The other left with uncertainty about who her father truly was. And that uncertainty, that space between truth and acceptance, is where real damage can occur if it's not handled with care. The judge spoke one final time, addressing the broader picture. She talked about responsibility, honesty, and the dangers of secrecy. About how relationships built in the shadows often leave children standing in the light, exposed and confused. She emphasized that sex is not casual when it creates life. That every choice carries consequences beyond the moment. She reminded them that denial does not erase responsibility, and belief does not override truth. That accountability begins the moment a child enters the world, whether planned or not. As the participants gathered their belongings, the mothers moved differently. One held onto hope cautiously, aware that the hardest work was just beginning. The other held onto faith, unsure of where to place it now, but unwilling to let go. Outside the courtroom, life would continue. Bills would still need to be paid. Children would still wake up asking questions. And parents would still be faced with choices: to step up, to walk away, or to keep searching for answers long after the courtroom doors closed. For the little girl who finally had her father confirmed, the future depended on whether he would become more than a name on a paper. Whether he would show up for birthdays, school events, sick days, and moments that matter when no one is watching. For the little girl whose paternity was denied by science, the future depended on honesty, on finding her story without lies, on growing up knowing that her worth was never tied to a test result or a courtroom decision. Both children deserved stability. Both deserved love. Both deserved adults willing to put their needs above pride, anger, and fear. And in the end, that was the real verdict the courtroom delivered, not just who was a father, but who needed to become one. The courtroom doors eventually closed behind them, but nothing truly ended there. Courtrooms don't resolve lives, they only reveal truths. What happens after is where the real weight settles, quietly, inside homes, inside hearts, inside the long nights when questions come back louder than before. For the man confirmed as a father, the result sat with him heavily. It wasn't relief that showed on his face, it was reckoning. He had spent years telling himself stories that made distance feel justified. That uncertainty excused absence. That confusion made neglect understandable. But the moment the words were spoken, all of that collapsed. He could no longer frame himself as a victim of circumstance. He was a father who had missed 2 years of his daughter's life. He looked at the little girl differently now, not as a possibility, not as a doubt, but as a responsibility. A child who had already formed memories without him, first steps he didn't see, first words he didn't hear, a bond delayed but not erased. Whether he chose to step into that role fully would define not just his future, but hers. The mother felt a mixture of validation and exhaustion. Being right didn't erase the loneliness she had lived through. It didn't undo the nights she cried quietly so her child wouldn't see. It didn't give back the support she needed when she was figuring everything out alone. But it gave her something she hadn't had before: certainty. And certainty meant she could finally stop defending the truth and start building something solid for her child. She hoped he would show up, not just once, not just for appearances, but consistently. Because children don't need perfection, they need presence. And presence is something no court can force, no paper can guarantee. It's a choice made over and over again. In the other case, the young mother left carrying a different burden. One that didn't come with closure, but with questions she wasn't ready to answer. The man she believed was her child's father was gone. The test said there was no connection. And now she stood between grief and reality, trying to protect her daughter from a truth she herself hadn't fully accepted yet. Her belief wasn't rooted in manipulation. It came from memory. From moments that felt real, from words spoken in private, from affection that convinced her of something lasting. To have all of that undone by science felt like having the ground pulled out from under her. And yet, the responsibility remained, to give her daughter truth, not comfort built on uncertainty. Her mother stayed beside her, unwavering. In her eyes, support mattered more than results. She knew her daughter's heart. She knew her intentions. And while the world might insist on facts, a mother's instinct clung to loyalty. Still, even loyalty must eventually make room for reality, especially when a child's future depends on it. The judge's words echoed beyond the courtroom. about worth, about choices, about the importance of honoring oneself before seeking validation from others. They weren't meant to shame, they were meant to protect, to prevent a cycle where young women confuse attention with commitment, secrecy with intimacy, and belief with proof. Because children grow up inside the stories we tell them, and when those stories change, the impact can be lasting. Both cases revealed the same truth in different ways. Adults move on. Children live with the aftermath. One child would grow up knowing her father, but always remembering the time he wasn't there. The other would grow up with unanswered questions, needing honesty delivered gently and courageously. Neither path was easy. Neither child was at fault. And in both stories, the adults were reminded that sex is never just a moment. It's a decision that can shape lives forever. That avoidance doesn't erase consequence. And that denial only delays responsibility. It never removes it. The courtroom existed not to punish, but to confront, to bring what was hidden into the open, to force conversations that people avoid until there's no choice left. And in that space, raw emotions collided with truth in ways that left everyone changed. As the mothers walked away, they carried different lessons. One learned that persistence can lead to answers, but answers don't guarantee healing. The other learned that belief without proof can be fragile, and protecting a child sometimes means letting go of a story you wanted to be true. Both learned that motherhood demands strength even when certainty is absent, even when support is inconsistent, even when the world questions your choices louder than it listens to your pain. And the children, silent through it all, remain the center of everything. Their futures shaped not by arguments but by what happens next, by whether adults rise above pride, by whether truth is handled with compassion, by whether love shows up when it's hardest. Because at the end of the day, paternity is more than DNA, and fatherhood is more than biology. It's responsibility, it's consistency, it's choosing to stay. And for every child waiting for someone to step forward, the real verdict is never just spoken in court, it's proven in life. She walked into the courtroom holding her mother's hand, her shoulders tense, her face calm but tired in a way that only comes from carrying a truth no one wants to believe. She wasn't there for drama. She wasn't there for money. She was there because she had a child, a living reminder of a relationship that now existed only in memories and unanswered questions. Across from her sat the family of the man she said was her daughter's father, a man who was no longer alive to speak for himself. She said she had been a virgin when she met him. She said she had never been with anyone else. And she said without hesitation that he was the father of her baby girl, Jaya. Her voice didn't shake when she said it. It didn't rise in anger. It stayed steady, almost protective, like a mother standing between doubt and her child. The man she described was older than her own mother. That fact alone made the courtroom shift. It explained the secrecy. It explained why the relationship had stayed hidden, why he never introduced her to his family, why he avoided conversations that would expose their age gap. She believed he kept quiet not because he didn't care, but because he was afraid of how it would look. She explained how they met, a chance encounter on the street. A conversation that felt harmless at first, a walk to a friend's house, time passing too quickly, trust forming too easily. She told him she was inexperienced. She told him the truth. And when the moment came, she believed it meant something. Candles, quiet promises, the illusion of care. To her, it wasn't casual. It was her first time, and she treated it that way. Their relationship continued for months. Not loudly, not openly, always in pieces. He came and went, changed cars, met her away from home, never stepped fully into her life. But she believed he was hers. And when she became pregnant, she believed there was no question who the father was. Her mother remembered the moment something felt wrong. A meal that suddenly made her sick, a feeling she couldn't explain, A mother's instinct telling her that one of her daughters was pregnant. Tests were taken. Truth was revealed. And instead of anger, her mother stepped in to help. Doctors' visits, support, preparation for a baby that would arrive with or without a father fully present. The man didn't deny the child. He said she looked like him. He gave her a nickname. He acknowledged her quietly, inconsistently, but enough to give hope. Still, he didn't attend appointments. He wasn't there when the baby was born. He didn't sign the birth certificate. Half present, half gone, always just enough to confuse, never enough to commit. Eventually, pressure came. Responsibility had to be claimed, assistance was needed, and that meant naming a father. The court date was set. A DNA test was scheduled, and then, suddenly, the man